Every advantage in motor racing you can usually see. A bigger engine you can hear coming down the straight. A wider tyre you can measure with your eyes. A clever wing you can photograph from the grandstand and copy in your own workshop by Tuesday. But in the summer of 1978, a black and gold car from a factory in Norfolk arrived on the Formula One grid with an advantage that nobody could see at all. It was not in the engine, which was the same Cosworth Phosphor 8 that half the grid was running. It was not in the bodywork, which if anything was cleaner and simpler than everyone else's. The secret was underneath. In the gap between the floor of the car and the surface of the track, the Lotus 79 had built a hurricane, and it was using that invisible storm to glue itself to the road with a force its rivals could not understand, let alone match. They called it Black Beauty. It won almost everything it entered, and within 3 years the sport had written a rule for the sole purpose of making it illegal. Not because it cheated, but because it worked too well. This is the story of the Lotus 79, the car that discovered a new law of physics hiding under a racing car and got that law banned. Let me start with a mistake, a happy one. Rewind to the 1960s and a young Cambridge-trained engineer named Peter Wright. Wright had a strange idea, one that most of the racing world thought was a waste of time. Everyone in that era made downforce with wings, flat blades bolted high up on struts that pushed the car into the road, but also dragged it backwards through the air like an open umbrella. Wright wondered whether you could make the whole body of the car do the work of a wing instead, quietly, without the drag. At BRM in the late 60s, he built a secret car to test it, and the project was killed the moment one of the drivers found out what was going on. He tried again with the shape of the March 701 in 1970, and it went nowhere. The idea sat in a drawer, dismissed. Then came the accident, and it happened in a wind tunnel. Wright was testing a model of a car over a rolling road, a moving belt that mimics the tarmac rushing under a real car at speed. And he noticed something that should not have been happening. As the airflow sped up, the model was being pulled down towards the belt, harder and harder, all on its own. The shaped sides of the car, curved underneath like the wing of an aircraft turned upside down, were speeding the air up as it squeezed through the narrow gap beneath them. And fast-moving air, as an aircraft engineer knows in his bones, means low pressure. The car was not being pushed down from above. It was being sucked down from below by the very ground it drove on. Wright added little cardboard walls along the edges of the model to stop air leaking in from the sides, and the effect went from interesting to phenomenal. The floor had become a giant vacuum. This was the secret. Not a wing you could see, but a shape you could not, working in the thin sliver of air under the car. And in 1975, the one man in racing bold enough to bet everything on it was already listening. Colin Chapman, the founder of Lotus, the most restless mind the sport has ever produced, sat down and wrote a brief of some 27 pages, laying out the whole concept, and handed it to his engineers with instructions to make it real. Wright was brought to Lotus. The vacuum was going to get a racing car built around it. The first attempt was the Lotus 78, which raced in 1977, and the racing world did not know what it was looking at. The car had strange fat side pods, long boxes running down each flank, and hidden inside the underside of each one was that upside-down wing shape, the tunnel that accelerated the air and dropped the pressure. Along the bottom edges hung skirts, flexible strips that brushed the track and sealed the low-pressure area in, exactly like Wright's cardboard walls, so the vacuum could not leak away. The press called it the wing car, without quite grasping that the wing was the floor. It won 5 races that year and should probably have won the championship, but it was a first draft, and first drafts have flaws. The pressure under the 78 was uneven, strongest at the front of the pods and fading towards the back, which made the car nervous and hard to balance, and its Cosworth engine installation blocked some of the airflow it wanted to keep clean. So Chapman and Wright and the design team went away and built the second draft, and the second draft was close to perfect. The Lotus 79 took the tunnels and stretched them further back down the car, so the suction was spread evenly along the whole underside instead of bunched up at the front. They cleaned up everything the air touched. They moved the fuel into a single central cell so the side pods could be given over entirely to aerodynamics. The result was a car that made roughly a quarter more downforce than the 78, with less drag, and did it smoothly and predictably so a driver could lean on it with total confidence. In the corners, it had something like 15% more grip than the best car any rival could field. And it was beautiful, low and clean and sculpted, dressed in the black and gold of its John Player sponsorship. which is why the mechanics christened it Black Beauty. Here is the part that matters. The Lotus 79 was not fast because of power. Its Cosworth DFV made somewhere around 475 horsepower, the same engine, give or take, that was bolted into the back of more than half the grid. It weighed about 575 kilograms, right on the minimum the rules allowed, the same as everyone else. On the straight, it was ordinary. Its entire crushing advantage lived in the corners, in a place no camera could photograph and no rival could copy quickly, because they did not even understand what they were trying to copy. They saw the side pods. They did not see the storm. The Lotus 79 made its race debut at the Belgian Grand Prix at Zolder in May of 1978, in the hands of Mario Andretti, the Italian-born American who had thrown in his lot with Chapman years earlier and believed in the ground effect idea when others laughed. Andretti put the car on pole position by around a second and a half, which in Formula One is not a margin, it is an insult, and then drove away to win as he pleased. The rest of the paddock stood in the pit lane doing the same sum, over and over, and not liking the answer. The car was not a bit quicker. It was quicker everywhere it mattered, and nobody knew why. What followed was one of the most dominant runs the sport had seen. Andretti won in Belgium, then Spain, then France, then Germany, then Holland. His teammate, the brilliant and beloved Swede Ronnie Peterson, won in Austria in the other 79. Race after race, the black and gold cars filled the front row and then filled the top two steps of the podium. Andretti and Peterson first and second, the two of them so far ahead they seemed to be in a different event. 6 victories that season came from the Lotus 79 alone. Andretti was marching towards the World Championship and Lotus towards the Constructors' title, and they were doing it with a car that on paper had no business being that far ahead of a Cosworth-powered field. The advantage was real, it was enormous, and it was completely invisible. Now, other people were watching all this and reaching for their own answers, and one of them was extremely funny and extremely illegal in spirit, if not quite in letter. The Brabham team, run by a young Bernie Ecclestone with a brilliant designer called Gordon Murray, could not make a proper ground effect car in time, so they cheated the physics directly. They bolted a giant fan to the back of their car and used it to suck the air out from underneath by brute force. Where Lotus harnessed the airflow passively, letting the car's own speed create the vacuum, Brabham simply switched on a vacuum cleaner. Niki Lauda won the Swedish Grand Prix in this fan car, and it was so obviously outrageous that it was quietly withdrawn after that single race. Keep that contrast in your mind, because it is the whole moral of this story. The fan car got pulled after one win because it was an active trick. The Lotus, which broke no such rule and simply used the air more cleverly than anyone else, would end up being the one the rulebook came for in the end. Let me pause here because we are about to leave the glory and walk into the hardest part of this story, and I want to hear from you first. So far, this is a tale of pure engineering genius, a British team finding an advantage nobody else could see. Tell me in the comments, what do you think is the cleverest hidden advantage anyone has ever brought to a racing grid, in any category, any decade? The thing rivals could not photograph. And if you already know how 1978 ends, hold it gently in the comments, because the next chapter cost the sport one of its most loved men. Now, Monza, the 10th of September 1978, the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, the fast old Parkland circuit near Milan. Andretti arrived needing only a solid result to seal the World Championship, and the mood in the black and gold camp should have been triumphant. It did not end that way. Ronnie Peterson had damaged his race car in practice, so for the Grand Prix he was put into the team's spare, and the spare was not a 79. It was the older Lotus 78, the first draft set up for the taller Andretti. On a circuit this fast, in a car that was not quite his, Peterson lined up in the field. At the start, the green light was given while cars at the back of the grid were still rolling forward, and the whole pack concertinaed together as it funneled towards the first chicane. There was contact. In the middle of it, Peterson's car was launched into the barrier and briefly caught fire. He was pulled from the wreck by fellow drivers, among them James Hunt, with terrible injuries to his legs. He was alive. He was conscious. The immediate danger, everyone believed, had passed, and the prognosis that evening was that he would recover. During the night, fat from the marrow of his shattered bones entered his bloodstream and reached his lungs, a complication called an embolism. And on the morning of the 11th of September, Ronnie Peterson died. He was 34 years old. And this is the cruel arithmetic of that weekend, the thing that makes 1978 so hard to celebrate. The race itself had been restarted after the crash. Andretti crossed the line first, but was given a 1-minute penalty for a jumped start, which dropped him down the order and handed the official win to Niki Lauda. On paper, Andretti did not win the race that made him world champion. He clinched the title on points in 6th place on the very weekend his teammate and friend was fatally injured in one of his own team's cars. He said afterwards that the championship, the thing he had chased his whole life, had turned to ashes in his mouth. The Lotus 79 had won him the crown. It had also, through no fault of its engineering, been at the centre of the darkest day of his career. Genius and grief in the same black and gold on the same afternoon. The Lotus 79 changed Formula One overnight and permanently, and here is the proof. Within a single season, every serious team in the pit lane was building a ground effect car of its own. The idea Peter Wright had carried around in a drawer for a decade, the invisible vacuum under the floor, went from a Lotus secret to the only way anyone could win. And that is exactly where the trouble began. Because once every car had the tunnels and the skirts, the cornering speed started to climb and climb and climb into a range the sport had never seen and its safety could not keep up with. A ground effect car cornered so hard it punished the driver's body, but that was not the real danger. The real danger was what happened when the seal failed. These cars generated their vast grip by keeping the skirts pressed to the ground and the vacuum sealed. If a skirt snagged or the car bounced over a curb or the nose pitched at the wrong moment, the seal could break in an instant. And when the vacuum let go, the downforce did not fade away gently. It vanished, all of it at once, usually in the middle of a high-speed corner, and the car simply flew off the road with no warning at all. The very thing that made these cars miraculous made them lethal when it failed. So the governing body did what governing bodies do when a technology outruns the safety around it. They came for it with the rule book, in stages. For 1981, they outlawed the sliding skirts and demanded a gap between the car and the ground, trying to break the seal on purpose. The teams, being racing teams, wriggled around it with clever suspension that let the cars squat back down on track and rise up again for inspection, so the ban barely worked. And so for 1983 came the blow that finished the era. The rulemakers mandated a flat bottom to every car, a plain floor between the wheels with no tunnels and no shaped underside allowed at all. In one stroke, the invisible storm was made illegal. The thing that Peter Wright discovered by accident in a wind tunnel and that Colin Chapman turned into the fastest car in the world was written out of the sport by decree. I want to be fair about this, because the honest version matters. They did not ban the Lotus 79 itself. By the time the rules changed, the 79 was already history, replaced by faster cars using the same trick. What they banned was the idea it unleashed, the ground effect it had proved to the world, and they banned it for the soundest reason there is, which is that it had become too fast to be safe. But strip away the caveats and the shape of the thing is undeniable. A small British team found a genuine new advantage, legal, brilliant, invisible, and the sport it dominated eventually decided the only way to deal with that advantage was to make it against the rules. Lotus even tried one last time, with a fiendish twin chassis car called the 88 designed to sidestep the skirt ban, and the authorities banned that one before it was ever allowed to turn a wheel in a race. They were not going to be outthought again. So think again about that black and gold car at Zolder in the spring of 1978, sitting on pole by a second and a half with rivals crowded around it looking for the trick and finding nothing. There was no trick. There was only a better understanding of the air than anyone else in the world possessed, hidden in the last place they thought to look, in the few centimeters of nothing between the floor and the track. That is the purest kind of advantage there is. Not more money, not more power, just a truer picture of how the world actually works, turned into speed. The Lotus 79 won its races in a place no camera could see, and it changed the way every racing car on Earth has been designed from that day to this. The ground effect they banned in 1983 came quietly back decades later, tamed and regulated, because the physics never went away. You cannot undiscover a law of nature. You can only for a while forbid people from using it. Colin Chapman gave the sport the monocoque, then wings, then this, the vacuum under the floor, and each time the establishment first laughed and then copied, and then, when they could not beat him, changed the rules. The Lotus 79 is the sharpest example of all, a car so far ahead that the only answer to it was a new law of the sport. Black Beauty won everything, cost a champion his joy on the day he was crowned, and left behind an idea too powerful to allow and too true to erase. So here is my question for you. Was the sport right to ban ground effect on safety grounds, or did they rob us of the most exciting cars Formula One has ever built? And what is the greatest example you can think of, in any form of racing, of the rule makers banning something for the crime of being too good? Tell me your pick and make your case in the comments. I go through every single one. I'll see you in the next one.